I think deer move relative to pressure. Deer respond to hunters like water flowing downhill. Every time we set foot in the woods, we are creating some sort of disturbance, either noise, visually, or scent. They're hearing me walk through the woods. Some of them are hearing me, maybe. Some of them might be seeing me. But to me, more importantly, is a bunch of them are smelling me. They might be smelling me as I'm moving through, but more importantly, when I walk into that food plot and I sit in that shooting house and I walk out, how many deer after dark crossed my trail and smelled me? So I hear deer hunters talk about, oh, we don't pull the trigger on food plots until January because we don't want to create any disturbance. Like, well, that game's over. You know, we don't shoot does until such and such. Well, but you've been hunting that same food plot, 14 times over the past 6 weeks. You've created all the disturbance you need. It's not the gunshots creating the disturbance. It's the hunter walking to and from. So when I got a real good look at spatial patterns and the individuality of deer was during my PhD. So while I was studying breeding behavior, there was a fellow graduate student that was looking at that. We had radio collars on bucks. We had 50 out at a time. And this was before the GPS collar. This was VHF when we'd have to go out with antennas and locate them. So there was a lot of work, but there was a lot of memory in terms of each individual location. We got to see where they went and what they were doing. And that was the point when I really realized how individual these animals were. At the same time, that property was being hunted. And so there were 6 weekend hunts. It was a military base, and it was McAllister Army Ammunition Plant. Anybody can go look it up. It's the best population of white-tailed deer in the country that the public can hunt, in my opinion. It's a lottery system, but these are tremendous deer. Well, for 6 straight weekends, there would be hunters out there. And what we noticed was there'd be 250 hunters each weekend. These hunters would hunt the same trees. Be new hunters in a weekend, the same trees the next weekend, the next weekend, the next weekend. You could go out there and we'd sit there, and we were poor graduate students, and we'd be out there during the week doing radio telemetry, and at night we'd say, oh my God, look at that line of bright eyes down through the woods. I don't want to have to go to Walmart and pay for bright eyes. I'd go out there with a flashlight, and I'd go pick them all up. We would go pick them up. I wasn't the only one. And the next week, we come by, and it's like, there's a line of bright eyes there again. They lead to the same tree. Weekend after weekend after weekend. So you would go hunt, and as a hunter, you would identify, oh, this is a good spot. You'd go in the next weekend, and you'd say, oh, this is a sweet spot. I'd go in the next weekend, oh my gosh, this is a great spot. We're all seeing the same thing. What you guys just did was you just educated the deer for 2 weekends that there's a hunter here, and then my dumb butt would go hang a tree in the same spot. The deer that you're seeing has learned a pattern. This is where people aren't every weekend on this management area. The people that are hunting these management areas are doing the same things as they were doing on that military base. They're going and hunting the same spots every weekend. Jimmy's going out weekend 1 and hunting that area. Johnny's going out and saying, man, I can see, I have good cover here, I've got the acorns. They're hunting the same location, and they're almost all within 100 yards of a road.
So, as a hunter and a researcher, I mean, how does that strike you? I mean, how does that affect the way that you approach hunting?
Well, you asked the question earlier, and this is probably what I should have said is the individuality of the deer was always the most shocking to me. But the way my mind has changed with regards to hunting and deer is I hunt what I feel. I think deer move relative to pressure. Deer respond to hunters like water flowing downhill. Every time we set foot in the woods, we are creating some sort of disturbance, either noise, visually, or scent. They're hearing me walk through the woods. Some of them are hearing me, maybe. Some of them might be seeing me. But to me, more importantly, is a bunch of them are smelling me. They might be smelling me as I'm moving through, but more importantly, when I walk into that food plot and I sit in that shooting house and I walk out, how many deer after dark crossed my trail and smelled me? So I hear deer hunters talk about, oh, we don't pull the trigger on food plots until January because we don't want to create any disturbance. Like, well, that game's over. You know, we don't shoot does until such and such. Well, but you've been hunting that same food plot, 14 times over the past 6 weeks. You've created all the disturbance you need. It's not the gunshots creating the disturbance. It's the hunter walking to and from. And so what I've started to do is think about all of my hunting in terms of disturbance and how are deer responding to that. Whether that be the creaky gate when I'm going into my property, whether that be me offloading the four-wheeler to, I do have a creaky gate, I don't have a four-wheeler, but just describing the general hunter, offloading the four-wheeler. Well, it's 1.5 miles in there and I don't want to disturb him with the truck. Well, you're disturbing him with the four-wheeler. Well, so-and-so says, I have an electric golf cart. You're disturbing him just the same. They're learning our patterns, whether it be the noises we make, where we hunt, the things that we do. And I think it's fairly simple. This is what these critters do for a living. They avoid getting eaten. And we're just another predator. And they learn to pattern us. Grant Woods, very, very well-known consultant, used to work very closely with a fellow by the name of Brian Kinkle. And Brian was he was a spatial guy like you. Back in the early 2000s, he started playing around with all of their hunting effort, and he created a surface density map in terms of their hunting pressure on a property. And so you had like mountains where they hunted a lot, or dark areas where they hunted a lot, and white areas where they didn't hunt at all. Well, their dark areas, when you look at their map, are right by food plots and this and that. The next year, they made a conscious effort. They said, we're only going to hunt in the spots that we didn't hunt the previous year. They tripled their hunting success. A year later. That's a year later. Those deer remembering from the previous years where they're hunting. Because they've been taught when they were fawns, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. Now you want to go out there and shoot a 4.5-year-old buck. Well, that buck's been educated for 4 years. The previous 4 years has been educated. And then every time you go in the woods, you're giving them the new pattern. How do you hunt relative to that? That's what I do. I don't hunt. On the property that I hunt, I sit on the ground. I'm driving into the woods. I'm driving to the spot saying, okay, what's the wind direction? What's this? What's that? Okay, I'm going to go sit over there and I'm going to see if I can get these deer moving up out of this bottom. Or I'm going to go sit over there, 200 yards off that food plot, see if I can't get them coming across the back end. Or I'm going to sit on the edge of, you've identified some, I identify areas that tend to be travel corridors by doing that. But what I do is I never hunt the same place twice. So I don't have the highs and lows of other people. I tend to consistently see 2 or 3 or 4 deer as opposed to 10 today and 0 tomorrow.
So you're almost trying to be unpredictable with how you're approaching.
Well, it's how I enjoy hunting, number one. But what I've come to learn is there is an unpredictability about it. It's not me trying to do it. It just happens to be the way I enjoy hunting and saying, I think these deer are doing that, and I'm going to try and get them there. But I also learn the property better. I'll go hunt a food plot. Or I'm not seeing anything. I'm going to slide out to that food plot in the last 15 minutes and see if I can see one out there or something like that. I do hunt some open areas, and I hunt some areas consistently. I will put up a ladder stand. It's like I know deer are moving through there. I'm going to go hunt that spot. Obviously, during bow season, I'll put up stands. It's really hard to hunt from the ground. But I do a lot of sitting on the ground. A lot of sitting on the ground. When I'm hunting my area that I'm allowed to hunt, is when I'm a guest, I'm generally in a stand.
Now, is this something that you've always done, or is this something based off the research is shifted you that way?
It's something that I learned to do. I grew up hunting on a bucket. When I first started hunting, we were hunting cornfields and woodlots. It's like, Steve, why don't you go sit over there? You haul out a 5-gallon bucket. I'd sit on that bucket. But there was great flexibility, so I was comfortable sitting on the ground. And it was Michigan. We could not hunt out of an elevated stand. You had to be on the ground. It could be a blind, It's since changed, but at that time, you had to be on the ground. And so I was just comfortable with that. And it just translated into the way that I hunted here, that I was just like, yeah, I'm flexible. I can go wherever I want, and I've got a rifle. It's 100 yards. If I can't hide 100 yards away, then
Got bigger problems.
yeah. And I've been around, there's been some folks that I've been out with, I'm like, sit here, and they're like, I'm not comfortable on the ground. And then after that one hunt, they're like, that was awesome. And I enjoy it. I think you learn your property better. I think you learn movement patterns better because you're moving from spot to spot, and I think you're less predictable to deer. I think you're going to have less highs and lows. Those seasons when warm, wet winters in the southeast tend to produce low deer harvests. Stuff's constantly growing. The deer aren't as hungry. They're not going on the food plots. Cold, dry winters, we have greater hunter success. I don't experience that. Mine's steady either way. The deer are still moving off the food plots because I'm not on a food plot much.
Going back to when you were talking about the story of the bright eyes and everything on McAllister ammunition plant, do you think that part of the reason why hunters were going to the same spots week after week and they didn't have any association with who was previously there was partly to do also with the habitat and if they were going to be elevated? Because I've seen photos from that place and some of it looks pretty brushy. Do you think that has to be a factor, or do you think it was just naturally based off how the terrain, the habitat was? They just naturally funneled to the same locations.
McAllister, there's a lot of open areas, so you are restricted. In some of the parts of the property, you're very restricted because it's just open grassland. So you're trying to get into those bottoms, and you're restricted in some ways. The areas where we were seeing the bright eyes were the wooded areas. That's where we would see the bright eyes through the woods, and I think what ends up happening is we have the same search image, particularly with bow hunting, is this is a good tree, or this tree's producing. That, and we have a tendency, there's been studies of hunters. Hunters generally don't get more than 100 yards from a road. Whether it's, I don't want to drag it that far, or it's they start to become less secure in themselves, whatever that is. Those hunters that are willing to get off the road, get away from those patterns, those hunters that stay within that 100 yards, they keep hunting the same spots.
That is an interesting takeaway, because just thinking about, especially in the deep south, hunting clubs are so popular. And most people, like I hunt a lot of public land. Andrew's in a hunting club, just got a new hunting club like a couple weeks or a week ago. And Andrew, he was talking to the president, and 99% of where everybody's hunting is on a food plot. That's where they kill the majority of their deer. And you go and you look at all these historical shooting houses that are built in. Most of them are off the food plot a little ways, not super far, but off the food plot. But they're historical spots people are consistently going back to and hunting over and over again, and they're easy to get to.